I'm home.
Throws to the near side, and that's intercepted. Intercepted by Jack Jones, heading down the near sideline, and this will be a pick six for Jack Jones and a touchdown for Arizona State.
People here, when you think of Sun Devil football, you think of Sun Devil for life.
Here we go, 7 seconds. Berkovici. He's just going to air it out deep downfield, and no white shirts around. Oh, Jalen Strong! Caught for a touchdown! Jalen Strong makes the catch!
I went to Arizona State. Right. I'm a Sun Devil, man.
This is about the Valley. We need the Valley. If we get the Valley all in, the sky is the limit.
Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Today is National Signing Day. It's the beginning of the early signing period, and even though Kenny Dillingham's only been in the job for about 3 weeks, he has certainly made the most of his time because he made us work a lot today.
Everything from like all day Sunday through today, I tell you what, it has been a blur. I know a lot of us, like, you're jamming in your last little, bit of work before the holidays and things like that. For some, it's kind of laid back time. For some, it's crank out a bit of work here. Kenny Dillingham and staff been doing work between transfers that came in over the weekend and committed to ASU and a real active signing day that produced some real positive results. It's been, just a wild, wild time, but it's stuff that, could set the program up with some depth, with some quality. So all in all, you got to be happy with the direction of how things are going at this particular point in time.
Yeah, whether it is high school signees, some JUCO additions, or just, as we've been talking about the last couple shows, a very active coming and going through the transfer portal. The Sun Devils under Kenny Dillingham and his now complete staff are starting to take shape. I believe the last count is about 30 new additions in the 24 days as of this podcast recording that have been made to the roster. And we knew that a big roster overhaul was coming. There's going to be a lot of departures, a lot of churn, but it seems like so far, and it's certainly far from a completed look, but so far the returns are pretty good. So we're going to be breaking down all the guys that have officially signed and are part of the program. Some portal additions who are kind of official. We'll get into it, but kind of the school is bound to them. They're not necessarily bound to the school, but all the comings and goings. But before we dive into that, Joe, I think some folks are hungry for a little bit of news.
Yeah, before we jump into all of this huge buffet that ASU has put together over these last handful of days in terms of player personnel coming into the program. Of course, when you're getting a meal of food, you got to go to no other place than DeFalco's Italian Deli at 2334 North Scottsdale Road. You can check out their menu online at defalcosdeli.com. It's a fun time right now, not just with sports going on, but of course the holiday season. It's a time to be of good cheer, and no better way to spread cheer to yourself and to those you love than with DeFalco's Deli. Now, keep in mind, like many places, they're going to have some limited scheduling issues when it comes to the next week or so with the holidays, which is understandable. They'll be open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. On Christmas Eve on the 24th, closed on the 25th and 26th, and then open for business the majority of the following week. New Year's Eve, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and closed New Year's Day. So if you're trying to get your fill, which I suggest that you do, just keep that in mind. Get on out to DeFalco's Deli. Get yourself a meal of food at 2334 North Scottsdale Road in Scottsdale, Arizona.
All right, so just a couple of quick news items before we dive into the real meat of the program with all the new additions coming through today. ASU did make an addition to the administration of the football program Brian McGinnis is coming to ASU as the new director of football operations. Most recently, he spent a decade at Colorado, so another experienced figure helping on the administrative end for the Sun Devil football program.
Yeah, and that's an important role within the program. It is kind of interesting to see responses on message boards and social media and folks saying, well, Colorado's been a really bad program for a while, so I don't know if this is a good hire. The football operations side of things on the administrative scale, they're deeply involved in a lot of things, but it's not an on-field coaching role that calls plays and executes plays and things like that. So I wouldn't necessarily say that those roles though they are very important in the operational side of things, I wouldn't necessarily, put it as apples to apples with what a team's outcome is on the win-loss column. But yeah, an experienced guy that comes from this, general part of the country in the Pac-12. So it's an important hire, and they made one, again, a guy with experience, and that's something that's valuable.
Yeah, so coming on the heels of the recent hire of Tony DeFeo as the associate athletic director overseeing football. So these days, the football operations side of things is of crucial importance because you're basically having to run your program like I hate to use this, especially after the last couple of years, but kind of like in a professional type of model in terms of your roster construction and all the considerations of NIL, the portal, the management. It's basically the openness of the portal giving way to collegiate free agency. So there's a lot of behind the scenes elements that go into a top notch product on the field. So a lot of behind the scenes work there that ASU is certainly kind of ramping up to, and we'll see how McGinnis and amongst the other folks on the administrative side of things are able to kind of help ramp things up in the coming years. And last news note, and this might be more of the fleeting variety because they're currently down 30 points in the first half, but Bobby Hurley's Sun Devils are in the rankings, number 25. They are, as we mentioned, as we're recording, they're getting hammered by San Francisco, but still 11-1's 11-1, good start.
Yeah, it could be that Grandpa Simpson gif as far as their stay in the top 25 because as we are literally speaking right now, the first half is wrapping up and ASU is absolutely getting obliterated in what, for the little bit that I've seen, has been one of the worst basketball games in the history of humanity that my eyes have ever laid sight upon. But in any event, yes, entering into the top 25 for the first time, I believe, since the 2020 season. That was a good accomplishment for this basketball program.
Yeah, and so we'll see how they're able to rebound. Well, you know what? Who knows? We don't want to shut the door necessarily on a comeback. This might be the feather in the cap of a season full of impressive second half comebacks and surges. But this is a real deep hole tonight. But of course, New Year's Eve.
I mean, the whole Vikings-Colts game. Crazy things happen. Who knows? We'll see.
Just the whole chip in a chair mentality. I mean, you're never out until you're fully out into final buzzer. So we'll see how they're able to rebound, especially when the Wildcats come to town on New Year's Eve for a marquee game. Probably going to be one of the best atmospheres in Tempe and in Desert Financial Arena in quite some time. Anyway, all that out of the way, Joe, let's dive in to what we saw on this very, very busy and very active National Signing Day.
And before we jump into that, no better time to give a huge shout-out, of course, to devilsdigest.com and encourage you all to become subscribers of that website, as we have seen throughout the past several weeks with the coaching hire and the filling out of the coaching staff and the transfers that have been announced, and very specifically what's gone on in the last 3 or 4 days worth of time. And of course, today on signing day itself, there's a lot of news going on, and you want to get that insider access that you can get on Devil's Digest. As you saw today, a lot of insight with the commitments that were going to take place and interviews with these signees that came through. My goodness, just about as fast as the faxes, if they still use faxes for the NLIs. What I'm saying here is that if you're not a member of the huddle, if you're not a subscribed participant of devilsdigest.com, you got to become one. There's still a lot of news to be shared. So if you missed out on signing day today, get into it. You're going to enjoy it. If you're a true Sun Devil fan, there's a lot going on there. Of course, you get insider access to premium content across the Rivals network, so you can read all about other teams and recruiting and various sports, things like that. So it's the best place to be if you're a Sun Devil fan at devilsdigest.com.
All right, so let's dive into what ASU was able to make official with signatures on the dotted line on today. And as we record this, is Wednesday, December 21st. It, of course, is the opening of the early signing period. Now, there will be some more action in the coming days as in this first window. And, of course, the traditional signing period will open up, I believe, on February 1st. But most of the action, is, of course, as it has for the last several years, has taken place on this first day of the early signing period. And while ASU did make a number of longtime verbal commits official, they also had a couple of very notable flips and things that have really kind of come together in short order since Kenny Dillingham and his staff have been really kind of hitting the ground running. And so let's start off with what probably the guy who maybe throw out the crown jewel tag, at least certainly one of the highest rated signees for ASU, and that's defensive end Ashley Williams at 6'6", 225 pounds, out of Zachary, Louisiana, a four-star guy, a one-time Auburn commit. He's a teammate of fellow signee Landon Thomas, and it seems like this is one that really kind of came together quickly. Thomas committed over the weekend, and ASU really kind of only started talking to Williams, I believe, the early part of this week. But credit to Dillingham and his staff, they were able to kind of show the value of ASU, what it could offer Williams. Obviously, he's a guy who has a great upside as a pass rusher, and I think right now we have probably the best quote I've seen in a while coming from a Sun Devil. Brian Carrington, ASU's defensive backs coach, was tweeting out some pretty interesting kind of little nuggets throughout the day in terms of each of the signees. And the best one so far today was he mentioned that Coach Regal asked Ashley Williams what he likes most about football, to which Williams replied, "I get to hurt people legally." That's a guy you want on your team.
Yeah, I mean, this one came together very, very quickly, as you mentioned. It's my understanding that the communication has just been a matter of days. Obviously, he doesn't visit here a lot. You kind of get that Manny Wilkins award to Landon Thomas about the recruiting of his own teammate there. So that was big time there. He's the number 20 weak side defensive end in the country, according to Rivals. I'm not sure if these are the final Rivals rankings or not. But he's a four-star prospect there, as you mentioned. He previously was an Auburn commit. Also, a ton of different offers, schools including, Florida State, Michigan, Nebraska, Texas, Washington, a handful of others. So this is a guy that has had, interest pretty much from coast to coast. When you're getting four-star caliber players on defense for what ASU needs to obviously reload and retool in a major way, that's a major, major win.
Yeah, the defensive line was an area of critical need after the departures, both through the portal and also just guys who exhausted their eligibility. So retooling that defensive line was very critical, and they did. I think they did a pretty good job in terms of what they were able to get from this initial haul. Of course, after Williams, we mentioned Landon Thomas, his teammate from Louisiana. He's 6'4", 243 pounds, a three-star prospect. Really kind of a great frame, and a guy who perhaps is more of a developmental piece to this defensive line. Carrington had his description was first off the bus potential, and that, of course, it reflects a guy that when they come off the bus, you want those guys that are just those physically imposing types, those bigger, stronger, faster type guys that really kind of can be more intimidation, just from the jump, from the bus to the field. And, of course, Thomas seems to fit that bill. And as you mentioned, Joe, pretty good recruiter in his own right as well.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to, both lines, but specifically, for what we're focusing on right now, the defensive line, you need everything. You need bodies, you need people for the future, you need people for the short term as well. So if this is someone that, I don't want to use the word project, but just a player that is going to need some developmental time, that's okay, since ASU is supplementing that with transfers or other players that might be able to, jump into the fray immediately. Who's to say that he can't find a role in the short term as well? But this is one that just, at first glance, is someone that kind of has that approach where you're looking maybe a couple years down the road to have the truest option to play significant minutes. But once again, really have to harp on the fact that there is importance in just reloading the depth for the short and long term.
The ASU last year was very bad at generating pressure behind the line of scrimmage, plays in general, the sack and tackles for loss totals for ASU were the worst in several years. So reloading those spots along the edges was of crucial importance for the Sun Devils in this cycle, and as we will see, they went out there and pretty aggressive in terms of landing some prospects. Williams is one of those guys, but they also were active in the junior college ranks as well, and they were able to land a commitment and then signing from Elijah O'Neal, 6'4", 245-pounder out of Butte College in California. He's the number 2 ranked JUCO edge defender. Now, his production is just something that should make ASU fans pretty eager with anticipation. Just 11 games last season, he put up 26 tackles for loss and 14.5 sacks. He's a guy that had over a dozen D1 scholarship offers, and he has 2 years of eligibility left.
Yeah, he's a top 50 overall JUCO recruit, according to Rivals. This is one that really caught my attention when he came on board, and I think he was one of, if not the last one to sign today. And so I was, wondering, like, my goodness, don't tell me someone came in the 11th hour, because when you see those numbers that you mentioned, as far as TFLs and sacks, that is music to the ears of Sun Devil fans and certainly the defensive staff for this team, because that is an area that really needs to improve. So if he can come and adjust to the FBS level and acclimate quickly and do the kind of things or anything in the universe of what he did at the JUCO level, that's going to be a huge, huge boost. So, yeah, he's one, as far as these recent additions, or honestly in this class as a whole, he's on my short list of ones that I'm most intrigued to see what he can do at this level.
All right, so continuing on the defensive line, this is a guy that we talked about last week as well. So defensive tackle Colin Fight, 6'1", 283 pounds, out of Tatum, Texas, a 3-star prospect. Now, of course, he was someone who committed over the summer, then decommitted after kind of the uncertainty of who the next ASU head coach was. But Dillingham and Brian Ward and the new staff on there were able to connect with him, and he soon recommitted and now is officially a Sun Devil.
Yeah, I mean, once again, you got to get guys in there. It's a good thing just on a intangible level when you have players that were committed to the previous staff and re-up here. You obviously like guys that are committed to the school, to the program as a whole, to the city, and all that good stuff. But to have that vote of confidence and to even have it be kind of invigorating, you see the things that are being said, and it's almost a greater level of confidence and a greater level of enthusiasm than there was before. So that just shows that things are resonating with these players, ones that have been in the plans for a while. So that's an encouraging thing on, like I said, an intangible level. Tangibly, I keep repeating myself, but you need to get bodies in here. You need to be able to replenish the departures by way of transfers and graduation. This first year for Dillingham and staff, I think a lot of it is just kind of the foundation. You obviously want to get talent as well, and that's what you're getting, but you also just need to plug a lot of holes so that you can have the requisite depth that you need in order to survive a full season.
Now, another area that the ASU was really aggressive in was the secondary. Now, of course, they have some returning starters and guys like Ro Torrance, Ed Woods, Jordan Clark, figure to be some building blocks in this new era of the Sun Devil secondary. But with ASU switching over to the 4-2-5 defense, there's going to be a lot of defensive backs out there, so a lot of depth is needed. And ASU today was very active in the defensive backfield and securing not just some of the familiar names that have been on the commit list for quite some time, but also some notable new additions, and most probably pronounced. The top of that list is a 4-star flip. ASU was able to get a commitment from Sean Russ Jr., 6'3", 175-pounder out of Fort Myers, Florida, a one-time Florida commit. As mentioned, a 4-star prospect, a guy who probably projects to a safety position, but getting another 4-star member of this class is pretty good feather in the cap for Dillingham and staff.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the offer list, there's some really impressive schools there. Of course, you mentioned Florida. You got Florida State, Michigan, Tennessee. I mean, you've got some elite programs, and obviously included in those some that really know how to play defense. So, if you combine this with Williams and you get a couple 4-stars on signing day itself on defense, just an area where ASU was what it was in 2022, really, really encouraging. You're seeing some themes continue. Obviously the previous coaching staff here, really went after those tall defensive backs, and that's what you get in a guy like Russ. So, really encouraged to get that signature from all across the country. I know that, a lot of folks, and to a certain degree myself included, have some trepidation when it comes to recruiting the South because there have been a lot of players that have chosen to flip away from ASU. Now, this is one that obviously worked in ASU's favor in a commitment that happened on very short notice. Not one of these players like we've seen in the past that's committed to the Sun Devils for months and then at the 11th hour chooses a closer program to home. This one worked in ASU's favor, and this is somebody that, as you swing the pendulum forward, and you have players that are going to be moving their way out of the program here by way of graduation in the relatively near future. He's someone that you'd certainly anticipate to hold a very strong role on this defense for years to come.
Russ is one of just a few guys that ASU was able to bring in that kind of fit some of those safety spots, some big-bodied, big-framed players that really could play a key role in that five-man defensive backfield. Moving on, Montana Warren, 6'2", 180-pounder out of Henderson High School in Texas, a 3-star recruit, one-time TCU commit, and at one point was, of course, recruited by Brian Carrington, now ASU's DB's coach. A really good size and speed combo with good ball skills. Carrington classified him as a true middle safety.
Yeah, and you know what? Hey, if it's someone that was on board at TCU, especially on defense, especially in the secondary, they know a little something about that. Didn't the Thorpe Award winner come from that very school this past year, if I'm not mistaken? So that's a vote of confidence in and of itself. It's an interesting case because if you look at his rivals profile, it has 5 scholarship offers, 2 of which are ASU and TCU, and then Incarnate Word, Louisiana, and Louisiana Tech. You see these sometimes where, there's just a huge spike of difference between maybe a couple offers and then others. That can mean nothing, or it can mean a variety of different things, just kind of an interesting little note with him. But for him to come out from Texas, again, someone that was committed to a program that's doing some amazing things right now, that's a stamp of confidence, and that I will gladly accept onto ASU's defense.
And another safety prospect, this guy who's perhaps one of those diamond in the rough types, Keontez Bradley, 6'2", 180 pounds out of Mansfield, Ohio, 2-star recruit per Rivals, but a guy who has a lot of athletic tools. He runs a 10.8 in the 100, and Carrington said he's long, rangy, tough, instinctive, fast, and physical. He plays with aggression, explosiveness, and seeks to make a statement upon impact. All good traits to have in a safety.
Yeah, and so again, he's someone, you use that diamond in the rough, but you like the length and the size at 6'2", though he's a 2-star prospect according to Rivals. Some interesting offers. He had Kent State and Kentucky. So these are some schools that have done some good things. So they know how to build up and they know how to find talent. So if this could be a diamond in the rough, that's certainly something that you're all for. Once again, adding depth in the secondary because you're losing a handful of players due to graduation and transfer. You still have some talent returning at ASU, but there's still a need to develop depth. So, again, shuffling the personnel like we've talked about on the defensive line, you obviously need guys that are going to play right away, but you also can take some that you can develop over time, and hopefully they improve year over year to the point that they're ready to hold a very significant role in the defense. So he's one that, again, could be one of those options that may not look a certain way on paper, but when the bullets are live and the field is rolling, that it's a different deal.
And rounding out the crop of high school safety prospects is one that I know a lot of folks are really excited about. Josiah Cox, 6'1", 186 pounds out of San Diego, a 3-star prospect, a very versatile defensive back, a guy that you can plug in at any of those safety positions, but also has a coverage ability and the ball skills to play nickel if needed.
Yeah, and so he's someone that's, a winner. I believe, he had some major accolades in the area he played, led his team to a state championship, if I'm not mistaken, at the San Diego area. Someone who had offers from the U of A, Oregon State. So, to get some wins over those sort of teams in the recruiting trails, never a bad thing to do. So, once again, some of these names might be new to folks, and that makes sense because they're pretty much new to everybody here. But that being said, very encouraged by a guy being a winner and a big contributor in what he did this year.
And one of ASU's flips on the day, kind of one of the ones that started off things in the morning, was another defensive back, Keith Abney, 5'11", 170 pounds, from Texas, a former Utah State commit. ASU was able to convince him to make the flip. 3-star prospect. Carrington says that he's twitchy, explosive, and consistently makes plays. And a kind of a fun fact about Abney, he was a national inline skating champion as a kid.
So I mean, I didn't look too much. I saw that, but I didn't look too much into it. I mean, is that like just speed, or is it like ice skating where you're doing creative things? It like makes me want to dig a little deeper into that. But so you'd think he has good footwork, right? Like
Absolutely.
That would maybe be the thing. Now he's got a decent offer list himself. Kansas State is on there for him, among some others. So this is someone that, gives you that versatility, like the evals that you're getting from the coaching staff. Once again, and I keep harping on it, but getting depth, getting bodies out there, getting players that meet the needs that this staff is looking for. That's important stuff.
And rounding out the secondary additions is another one that I know the coaching staff's pretty psyched that they were able to land a local product, a safety slash DB, Lennox Lawson, 5'11", 175-pounder out of Red Mountain High School in Mesa. 3-star prospect, a very explosive athlete, a guy who played both ways in high school, generated over 2,100 all-purpose yards, and a guy that might take some time to develop as a DB, but it could be a guy who makes an instant impact due to his explosive return abilities.
Yeah, he decommitted from Central Michigan to become a Sun Devil. And that last part you mentioned, I know our good buddy Ralph Amson has made some comments about how he can impact very quickly in the return game. Gives you some versatility because he was a skilled offensive threat as well. I think some folks, when his name was really starting to pop up prominently on ASU's radar, wondering if he was going to be like a slot receiver, or if he was going to hold an offensive position, if he was going to play defense. It certainly does look like he'll play on the defensive side of the ball, but that being said, he's someone that maybe like in a DJ Taylor type of mode, trying to figure out where he fits on offense or defense, but he can contribute on special teams.
Now, ASU did need to reload very badly on the offensive line as well, and they really were aggressive, and they got some dudes, some big dudes, both from the high school and JUCO ranks and also through the portal so far. Now, they should not be done. I think they're still going to be continuing very active on that space, but you like what they've done so far and what some of the guys that they were able to land today, starting with Kyle Scott, 6'4", 305-pounder, out of Riverside City College in California. He played right tackle for Riverside. Now, among his offers was one from Fresno State, and of course that means that ASU's current offensive line coach, Saga Tuatele, was the one who extended that offer to Scott. So he's a guy that has starting experience at the junior college level and has 2 years remaining of eligibility.
Yeah, so that's someone that, just depending on how things shake out, he might contend for a starting position, might be more of a depth player. Once again, on the offensive line, when you just see the mass departures between graduation and transfer portal, and I know it's really up in the air. There's some talk maybe Ben Scott might have a shot at returning to ASU. Maybe that ship has sailed. Again, you really have to look at the entire depth chart and the 2 deep and fill out several positions. So you have someone like this who has experience from the JUCO level that can come in and potentially contribute. That's what you got to do. And so I like the strategy that ASU is taking with its offensive line recruitment, where you have some from the high school ranks, some from the JUCO ranks, some from the transfer portal, just kind of peppering in different things so guys can fit in different places.
And continuing on the junior college additions, they were able to get another guy with a very impressive frame, Maxwell Ihi Andachor, 6'7", 315 pounds, out of East Los Angeles College. The number 9 overall junior college prospect. He's played both right and left tackle. Is a guy that has relatively new to the sport of football. He has a basketball background, but so you combine basketball athleticism with a 6'7", 315-pound frame, along with 3 years of eligibility for him to come in and develop. That's an intriguing prospect in my book.
Yeah, he too is a top 50 overall junior college prospect, according to Rivals. Had interest from Cal, Iowa State, Kansas, Missouri, among some others. So, he's someone that generated some attention, around various conferences in the world of college football. Once again, someone that brings a very impressive frame. The coaches can coach him upright. Someone that could be in contention to start this year. Once again, you just need to get competition going to the point that you can sort out the correct pieces.
And rounding out the high school JUCO signees is a guy that we talked about a couple episodes ago, a local guy from Mesa Mountain View, Siri Candielli, 6'3", 270-pounder, a 2-star prospect. Kind of a tough kid, as we talked about with Chile, a guy who has that ass-kicking mentality. So perhaps, given that size, he's a guy that, being a high school recruit, has some time to come in here and develop under Coach Joe Connolly.
Yeah, you love what you hear about him, his energy, his enthusiasm, his passion for ASU, and the comments they hear from the likes of Chile and others that really, rave about the mentality that he has. Of course, as a true freshman incoming offensive lineman, you think the highest likelihood is that he's going to, redshirt and prepare for a role in the future. If that is the case, again, someone that at least shows the right attitude and the passion, and I think someone that obviously ASU fans should be supportive and cheer for everybody on the roster at all times. But this is the kind of guy, when you read what he said when he committed to ASU and the passion that he has for this football program, that's really something that can be supported.
And so we're kind of rounding out this crop of the high school JUCO guys. A couple of wide receiver additions to ASU's offense, starting with Caleb Black, 5'10", 170 pounds, out of Houston, Texas. He is a Memphis flip, 3-star prospect. Now, it just seems to me that that 5'10", 170-pound as a Memphis commit, that's just perfect. It just seems like Memphis over the last 5, 6, 7 years, just like that's the Memphis mold of smaller guys, very fast, very quick, very elusive. That's the kind of playmaker that the Tigers really like and have had great success. He's a very speedy, elusive, and a guy that could figure into the slot.
Interesting, competition there with Memphis, because of course Ryan Silverfield, their head coach, was an offensive analyst at ASU at the same time Kenny Dillingham was. So that head-to-head recruiting competition is something that, I don't know, maybe these guys dreamed of 7 years ago when they were involved in Todd Graham's staff. Who knows? But just kind of an interesting thing that you probably wouldn't know, unless you did the research, thinking that there probably aren't too many connections between Memphis and Arizona State. Of course, Mike Norvell having been there is the kicker with that. So he had a handful of offers from a group of 5 caliber schools. You see the likes of Houston, Marshall, Kansas, of course, Memphis, North Texas, UTSA, also an offer from Wisconsin. So certainly a guy that, some Power 5 programs saw some potential in. So for ASU to bring him out of the Houston area is something that, again, a highly productive player with some burst there that could have some major upside.
And then rounding out the wide receiver additions, Corbin Hendricks, who of course has been a commit for a little bit of time from the high school ranks, 6'3", 180-pounder out of McKinney, Texas, 3-star prospect. Kind of has that good size and speed combination as a guy who could perhaps develop into a kind of a good outside threat. Guy who can stretch the field and kind of take the top off of a defense.
McKinney, Texas. I went to a concert there a couple years ago. Saw Reckless Kelly. Great band. So, I can relate. This is one that I think some folks are kind of labeling Hendricks as, the sleeper or someone that might be a little underrated. He had offer from Minnesota among some others. As you mentioned, he's been on ASU's commit list for a little bit now. So, he's someone that if you look at the rankings and the offer sheet, some of it may not leap off the page to you, but don't let that mistake you. This is a guy that's got good size at 6'3", could become a contributor sooner rather than later.
All right, so that rounds out the high school and junior college additions that ASU did make public. Now, one notable person on that list that we've talked about that was ASU's first verbal commit way back in, I believe, late April, quarterback Israel Carter at a Corona Centennial. And he made an announcement today that he will be signing in February. Now, of course, ASU, as we'll talk about here, has made some additions to the quarterback room. So, of course, these days, nothing's ever for sure. But, this is a guy who's been pretty vocal about rallying other recruits to join him in Tempe. Has been a really pro ASU in terms of his social media posts and being very active and vocal in that regard. But just one notable name that you will not see, come making any kind of official decisions anytime soon.
Yeah, it's an interesting development. Obviously, ASU's addition that we will discuss in a moment from the transfer portal seems to be the influential factor here. So that kind of is what it is. Now, obviously, he's got about a month, 6 weeks until the time that he will choose to sign. So ASU can still make its case. I don't know if the bridge has been burned or not. We will see how that all develops. Quite frankly, and I don't say this as like a sour grapes thing or we didn't want him anyway or anything along those lines. But if you ask me, it's a weird thing to say because it's the complete opposite of what the mentality would have been even just a couple years ago. Recruiting the quarterback position from the high school ranks almost seems kind of like a dicey proposition at this the way college football is right now because if you have a guy that is not going to play right away, like if you're not in a position to start a freshman or even as a redshirt freshman, then the possibility of transferring thereafter just seems kind of high. We just see that all the time now. Again, I'm not saying that would have been the case. I'm not saying that, ASU dodged a bullet. I'm not saying any of that kind of stuff. It's just that it's just such, as we're continuing to acclimate to this new landscape of college football, that's the kind of circumstance that just seems to make sense. You see guys that are, transferring at the quarterback position from various classes, and it's the common case at a variety of positions, but just different than many others. In most cases, quarterbacks schools are really only going to give one a lot of time. So, we'll see what happens with that. And if he chooses not to attend ASU, if they go other directions, if they continue to stock up at the position, so just something to monitor over the next handful of weeks.
All right, so we should round out this part, discussing the official additions for the Sun Devils with some guys that came over from the portal. Now, this is a little bit of a change in the fact that in the last few years, since the transfer portal has become a very viable option for player acquisition, that ASU did not make portal additions official via social media making official announcements, but a handful of these guys were made official in terms of the social media posting from the official channels by ASU. Now we'll get into more detail on these guys in our next section, talking more in depth about the ASU's portals comings and goings, but these are the guys that kind of were put out there in terms of official additions and acknowledged as such by ASU. Now, starting off with some of the guys who were among the first additions of ASU commits, defensive end Tristan Monday, a former Saguaro SaberCat. He's coming over from Wisconsin after redshirting there. He'll be joined on the defensive line by a new name, Sam Benjamin, from coming over from Idaho State. Of course, with Idaho State, head coach up there was Charlie Regal, now ASU's assistant head coach and special teams coordinator, and coach up there on the D-line by Vince Amy.
Yeah, it's really interesting, just kind of as a footnote, side note. I am really at a loss because I am just uncertain of why these handful of the folks from the transfer portal were announced through official channels for ASU and not the others. I don't know if it's something we're just kind of spreading out the news to kind of keep that content flowing. I don't know. Because, when it comes to the transfers, as many know, they sign that grant in aid paperwork, which binds the school to them, but not necessarily them to the school. It's basically, I think, when they show up to class is when it really starts to count, and that just hasn't happened yet, unless there's something I don't know about. I don't know if there's a winter session or something. I'm not really going to speculate too hard. But Benjamin was a new name. That was one that wasn't really on a lot of the hit list, so to speak, as signing day was approaching, and folks like Hode Rubino and Devil's Digest were putting together kind of the watch list for the possible candidates. He played as a true freshman at Idaho State on the defensive line, and obviously Vince Amy, Charlie Regal, they know what they have in him, so to vouch for him and bring him to Arizona State, I think means something. He's from the general Tucson area, so to kind of get a defector from that area up to ASU, that's a win in itself as well. So once again, we'll see kind of what role he plays over the course of his Sun Devil career. But as I mentioned with some of the high school prospects, getting bodies and depth on the defensive line is an important thing.
Yeah, and so kind of rounding out some of these portal additions that we'll talk about here in the next section. Punter Josh Carlson, former Gilbert standout, coming over from New Mexico State, was made official. One of the more intriguing transfer additions, Ben Coleman, an offensive lineman from Cal, very experienced and as a starter in the Pac-12 conference, is coming over. Wide receiver Melquan Stovall is another official addition, and then this is probably the one area that I've seen a lot of ASU fans really kind of talking about at the quarterback spot. Jacob Conover, the former Chandler quarterback who threw for 1 billion yards in his prep career while winning a bunch of state championships, and the name that certainly raised a lot of eyebrows, former Notre Dame quarterback Drew Pine.
Yeah, I mean, that one seemed to escalate quickly as well with Pine. I mean, Conover obviously made a bunch of sense, given the fact that he's an Arizona native, went to Chandler High. That made a heck of a lot of sense. He was in that early flurry of transfers from, I believe, day one of the transfer portal opening. With Pine, he played a lot, started a lot, and was involved in winning a lot of games. He has his critics, but he was successful at Notre Dame, so he's someone that, I think if you're looking from a depth perspective, certainly improves the quarterback room for ASU. We'll see if he's someone that is really brought in as a strong candidate to start. But regardless of what he is, he does bring game experience, starting experience, and that means something.
All right, so those are the Sun Devils who have officially signed and have been acknowledged. And as Joe mentioned, the guys that are coming via the portal, there is of course a little bit of differentiation there in terms of that they are bound. The school ASU is bound to those players, but the player is not bound to the school until class is attended. So there is that kind of wiggle room there, although don't expect any type of situation there. So now let's turn our attention to the comings and goings of the transfer portal, and this is an area where ASU and the coaching staff have looked pretty stylish in the last couple of weeks.
And if you want to be stylish, and if you want to be generous with your style, I mean, come on now. We only got a couple days left before you got to shell out some gifts. Make sure everything under the tree looks real nice and generous. Get on down to Cactus Sports, 514 South Mill Avenue, of course, in beautiful Tempe, Arizona. Only a few shopping days left. So for the Sun Devils in your family, make sure you get on down to Cactus Sports. You may be able to order online. You might have to, chip in a couple extra bucks for the shipping since you are on short notice. But hey, even when these holidays come and go, being a Sun Devil, that's a year-round thing. So you want to get your ASU gear at Cactus Sports. Once again, you can shop at their store location at 514 South Mill Avenue. You can always shop online as well at cactussports.com.
All right, so here is a refresher on. Let's start with the departures before we get to the fun stuff in terms of the new Sun Devils. Now, as a reminder, the transfer window, the first of two. This one opened on December 5th. Will run 45 days, closing on January 18th. Now, the Sun Devils who are in the portal that have not found a destination: cornerback Keon Markham, safety Keywan Markham, defensive tackle Omar Norman Lott, kicker Jace Feely, center Ben Scott, and wide receiver Cam Johnson. Those are the ones that we have previously discussed. 3 new additions have been made since then. In cornerback Isaiah Johnson. Now, this is, of course, the highest rated recruit that ASU was able to pull down in, I believe, the 2020 or 21 class. He played in 6 games last year, 16 tackles, 2 pass breakups. But he was a guy that just, when he was in there and able to play, he flashed some pretty promising potential. You could see why he's such a highly rated recruit. However, staying on the field and being on time for practice and staying in the coaching staff's good graces was a bit of a challenge, and so unfortunately, never really able to kind of have a chance to be out there for sustained stretches and really kind of tap into his vast potential. Now, he's a guy that's already been getting a lot of offers. I believe I saw him tweet out that Coach Prime at Colorado has offered him as well. But in terms of a guy with some high recruiting pedigree in the portal, Isaiah Johnson is one of those guys that is the most recent to enter.
Yeah, really real frustrating. I mean, that's really the only way to describe the season that he had, because he came out and played very well in some action early in the season, and then I believe he was limited in a game due to some disciplinary issues. Then there was a game I don't believe that he traveled to the road, where otherwise he probably would have been starting for the majority of the year, and really setting himself up for something nice and helping contribute to Sun Devil defense that desperately needed his presence. Obviously, like you mentioned, he came through with high accolades, and that's something that is going to follow him to his next destination, and he certainly has some very good film. He should find a very good spot. I believe Miami offered as well. So this is someone that's going to end up at a above average to high caliber Power 5 program, because he's got that potential. It's just frustrating that it didn't work out as such here, but I mean, all the talent in the world, if there are focus, disciplinary issues, things like that, I mean, you hope that he matures out of it and succeeds through the rest of his career, but it just was something that was a bit of a theme this past year for him at ASU.
And one of the other additions is to the portal from ASU, defensive end Garen Stansbury. Now, this is a guy that didn't really get on the field a whole lot. He did see a little bit of playing time, but more of a developmental project. And this is one of the favorite guys of former defensive line coach Robert Rodriguez. He absolutely raved about his potential. Played in 10 games, including 2 last year. I had a sack a couple years ago, but this is a player that had a great frame, a lot of physical tools. It was a really raw prospect coming out of Louisiana. But as we saw with a few of the other defensive line departures, a lot of those guys really love playing for Coach Rod, and so it's not a surprise to see, with Coach Rod not being retained, that they're entering the portal and exploring their options.
Yeah, he's someone that we'll see what develops over the course of his career. As you mentioned, he came to ASU. He was one of multiple defensive linemen that ASU recruited under Herm Edwards that had that big frame. He knew they were going to take some time to develop. So we'll see what what happens for him over the duration of his career. The role was limited during his time at ASU. So again, the jury will be out as far as what the true impact of his departure is. However, when it comes to the defensive line, though ASU is recouping to the best of its ability through recruiting in the transfer portal, you hate just to lose bodies, especially ones who have years of experience in the team.
And rounding out the trio of new departures that since we last talked to you on our previous episode, quarterback Finn Collins, who I know a few fans were out there were really excited about his potential and would have liked to see him get involved in the race a little bit more. But just could never really kind of make a mark in terms of the crowded depth chart that the Sun Devils had ahead of him. Now, as we'll talk about here, they've made a couple other additions through the transfer portal, so it looked like he had a tough road ahead to get some playing time. So he a few days ago has entered the portal to explore his options.
Yeah, I mean, and that just makes sense. Again, the quarterback position, kind of a zero-sum game in a lot of circumstances, as far as there's only going to be typically one guy out there getting the bulk of the reps. And when you see the recruiting that ASU has done, primarily through the transfer portal, the writing is pretty much on the wall there. And you would imagine that from now through the entire offseason, it stands to reason that he won't be the only scholarship departure at quarterback. He's the only one, the new one to the transfer portal. ASU, all told, has had 3 quarterbacks, right, that have entered the transfer portal, but there's just a lot of shuffling at that position group. So, you'd imagine there probably will be some more entries, whether it's now or in that other, transfer portal option that's coming in the spring.
Yeah, so those are the 3 new ones. Now, talking about some of the ASU Sun Devil players that have entered the portal and have found a home, or at least declared a home officially. We had previously talked about offensive lineman Ladarius Henderson. He's going to be a Wolverine. Will play up for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, and punter Eddie Chaplitsky is now heading over to USC. But since we last showed you, there have been a flurry of other commitments, and in a few of these cases, actual signings. Now, 2 Sun Devils will be sticking together as they head up to Seattle to play for Washington. Defensive end Joe Moore, who I thought was kind of on the precipice of breaking out last year. He had a number of plays where it just seemed like he was so close to getting a big sack or making a big play. But just kind of indicative of the entire defense's inability to make those big game-changing type plays. But he has still a young player, a lot of potential. Joe Moore will be a Husky, and he'll be joined up in Seattle by the Bay, the Sound, whatever it is, by running back Daniel Ngata.
I think those are two players that ASU fans are going to keep a fairly close eye on to see if they fall into the what could have been category. Of course, they were both 4-star recruits that came to ASU. Both got a handful of playing time, especially Moore, and a lot of folks were really clamoring for Ngata to get more action. Though in the last 2 years, it's tough to take the ball away from the likes of Valladay, Rashad White, and even in the COVID season when Chip Trainum was playing more. So just was ASU had the difficult situation, if you're Ngata, of facing just some of the more talented rushers the Sun Devils have had in recent years. So it's tough to take the ball into their hands and give it to somebody else. So we'll see what both these guys do up there with the Huskies. And, it could be one of those circumstances where if one or both are really performing at a high level, you might have some, ASU fans grimacing about the fact that they're not doing it in Tempe.
Both ASU long snappers have found their new home. Gage King is heading to UCF. John Furlman is going to be a Buckeye.
Yeah, and, good for these guys finding solid spots. ASU obviously reloaded at that position, and, we'll get a grad transfer in Zellers. That's an accomplished player at that position. So, that's one where I think a little bit different than the previous statement of, running backs and defensive ends, getting touchdowns, catching passes, getting quarterback sacks. Of course, the long snapper, very important position on the roster, but not one that's going to get a bunch of attention unless things are going poorly. And ASU should be in good shape, at least for this season, and then reload from there. So I think it kind of works out for everybody where the Devils got a good one, and the ones that are leaving found good homes. As
you mentioned, a couple of former ASU quarterbacks have found their new destination. Paul Tyson, who never saw any action in a game, he's now heading to Clemson. And Emory Jones, who of course opened up as ASU's starter and started, I believe, the first 7 games last year, he's now going to go play for Cincinnati.
The Tyson one was very interesting, right? Because, he's someone that obviously came to ASU with some high accolades and played, at Alabama and got some playing time, was a big-time recruit. But, man, I mean, he just, like you mentioned, just didn't see the light of day at ASU in a season where a change was made at quarterback. I mean, his name was just never in the conversation of being a legitimate candidate for playing time here. So, it'd be interesting to see if he gets hit at Clemson. Of course, Clemson, one of the powerhouses of college football. And even though they've had transfers of their own, I mean, they got a guy that was a massive blue chip quarterback who opted to leave because he was outplayed by a younger player. So you hope for the best. When these transfer situations come about, there are a lot of things that go into it. And, I'm not necessarily saying that this statement is true with Tyson, but, sometimes you might have egos get in the way, and you might say, hey, well, if I'm leaving, I want to upgrade. It's like, you break up with a girl and you want to go out with somebody who looks better than her, even if it's a circumstance where that person is not a great person or someone that you should be with. It's just like it could be a competitive side of these athletes. I don't know. I'm just pulling stuff out of thin air here, to be honest with you. But it just seems like an interesting thing to me where if he's not getting playing time at Arizona State, all due respect to the team that we like to focus on, you just figure that the path to playing time at Clemson is going to be even more difficult. So we'll just see how that pans out. Now, with Emory Jones, that could be a good opportunity for him. Of course, with Cincinnati going into the Big 12, I'm not sure what their quarterback position is like, to where if there's a clear path to start, or if he's going to have to beat out any incumbents or anything like that. But he's someone that certainly has the skill set to start at the Power 5 level. Of course, he did it in the SEC. As long as he's supported by an offensive game plan and coaching staff that can help him play to his strengths.
Yeah, I think it'll be playing into his advantage is that there's a new coaching staff, of course, at Cincy with Scott Satterfield taking over there, and Cincinnati still had a solid season, but by their recent standards, kind of tailed off a little bit, as to be expected after their playoff run, and they lost a lot of key guys there as well. But so just wishing those guys nothing but the best. So now let's talk about ASU's portal additions. Now here are the guys that we've already kind of broke down in detail on our previous couple episodes. As we mentioned, defensive end Tristan Munday was the very first guy to come home. Coming over from Wisconsin, he is signed. Linebacker safety Crew Jackson from Queen Creek, coming over from Kansas State. He is not yet signed. Wide receiver Jake Smith from USC, formerly of Notre Dame Prep. Of course, Josh Carlson, the punter, he is signed. Long snapper Slater Zellers is joining ASU from Cal. Linebacker Tate Romney is coming over from BYU. Quarterback Jacob Conover from BYU is one of those guys that has signed. And running back DeCarlos Brooks, you can hear on our previous episode, the former Chandler running back, most recently played at Cal for a few years. He is also a portal addition as well. Now, here are the guys that, as Joe mentioned, it was a very active last several days that ASU made a number of, received a number of commitments. So, starting with in this most recent batch, wide receiver Melquan Stovall. He spent his first 3 years at Nevada, but then most recently played at Colorado State. He is officially signed. He is a 5'8", 185-pounder. Played the first 3 games for the Rams and head coach Jay Norvell last year, making 13 catches for 106 yards, but then opted to redshirt with the intent to kind of explore his options through the portal. But going back a couple years at Nevada, he hauled in 56 catches, 643 yards, and a score in 2021. And so he's a guy that has some experience at the FBS level and has 2 years left to play.
Yeah, experience is a big deal, especially a wide receiver. He's got 121 career passes. That's no slouch. Interesting numbers across the board because his career average is under 10 yards a reception. He only has 1 touchdown catch and 121 receptions, which is kind of interesting. But again, someone that brings experience into things here. And as you mentioned, he caught over 50 passes just a couple years ago. So he's been there. He's done that. And that's something that, at wide receiver for ASU, with some shuffling out of, transfers and graduates and things like that, to have somebody with that level of experience, that's something that is highly valuable. It remains to be seen, of course, where he fits in the offense, if he's going to be a focal point, because you almost kind of look at this, in a similar, circumstance that you did, with, transfers from last year, such as Cam Johnson, who had relatively similar numbers from his time as Vanderbilt and really didn't do much this past year. So again, I think as we're in the second full season of the transfer portal, I think some of us have, I don't know if tempered enthusiasm is the right way to describe it, but something where you look at the body of work that players did elsewhere and say, okay, that is appealing, or it has potential, or whatever it may be. And you say, okay, I like that. Let's see how it translates to ASU.
ASU, of course, needed some help on the offensive line, and this is one addition that I think, provided the return from injury proceeds as scheduled, is going to be a nice boost for the Sun Devils in the trenches. Aaron Frost from Nevada, 6'5", 305-pounder. Now, of course, he missed all of last season with an injury, but prior to that, in 2020 and 2021, he was an All-Mountain West second-team honoree. 37 career starts on the old resume, and given that experience, he has just a single year of eligibility left.
Yeah, and so those accolades, those are things that really strike at you when you're trying to rebuild this offensive line. You got starting experience and performed at a high level with the all-conference honors. The health situation, that is something, of course, to monitor, and that's going to, of course, be the hugest thing. He's got to be able to be on the field. But when you're looking at these transfers, you have experience, you have accomplishments. I think that's a big deal. You got to get guys on the offensive line. We saw some issues throughout the course of last year, and they're losing some of their best players. So this sort of transfer is one that, again, as long as he can be on the field and healthy, I think hits the mark.
All right, ASU, of course, needed some help in the offensive backfield now with X-Valade and his amazing production in his lone season as a Sun Devil, and as we mentioned him a few minutes ago, Daniel Ngata, the number 2 back from a year ago, not returning. ASU went out, and if any of recent history is any indication, they probably got themselves a good one. They certainly got themselves a productive one from the FCS level. Cameron Scatibo from Sac State. Now, of course, Sac State was one of the most explosive offenses in the FCS. This is a guy that is a hard and physical runner. I watched some of the playoff games that Sac State was making their run. 5'10", 210-pounder, incredibly productive, Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year, 1,377 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. Also a guy who can be a very dangerous threat as a pass catcher, 31 receptions, 371 yards, and 3 additional scores. And mentioned the one thing that kind of stands out about Cameron is the physicality that he brings. He's a guy, one of those running backs who just kind of seeks out contact, and so he has 2 years left, and so it'd be a nice addition to that Sun Devil backfield.
This might be this may be the transfer I'm most eager to see how things translate. You mentioned hugely productive at the FCS level for a very good team at that level. Very tough runner, just someone that you just kind of take a glance at and think that's someone that could become a fan favorite very quickly. Of course, with ex-Valaday having graduated, Daniel Ngata off to Washington, you need to rebuild the top depth and the starting position at that group. So we'll see, is he going to be that bell cow, 20 carry a game guy? Are they going to mix it up a little bit? We really don't know how this coaching staff is going to handle that sort of thing, as opposed to the Herm Edwards days of really running one guy pretty much ragged for the most part, though they had some highly productive backs like Benjamin, Rashad White, and others. But this one is very intriguing to me, and if he is the guy, obviously he's going to need to do a lot for this team, and that's why a guy like that chooses to come to ASU.
ASU needed some help along the edges and some more weapons for defensive coordinator Brian Ward to attack with, and so ASU got a commitment from edge Prince Dorba from Texas. 6'3", 232 pounds, a former 4-star prospect in the class of 2020, just outside the top 150, 157th overall player per Rivals, and a little bit better on 24/7, 127th overall, a All-American Bowl 2020 participant. He's a guy that can rush and make some plays off the edge, but being a younger guy who hasn't got a whole lot of run with the Longhorns, still has some areas to kind of round out his game. But as we talked about, I think on every episode, really, the benefit of the portal nowadays, as opposed to kind of the former landscape with just the grad transfers, that some of these guys come in with multiple years. And in Dorba's case, 3 years of eligibility left. So this could be a guy that can help develop, can be an instant impact for the Sun Devil defense, but also continue his development over the next couple of years.
I mean, man, you look at his recruiting profile, offers from Alabama, LSU, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma State. I mean, that's pretty much a who's who right there. He's still young. He's still got time. So, even if he's not an all-conference, all-American right now, that doesn't necessarily mean by any means that this dude's a bust or anything like that. So, in these cases, a change of scenery can be the best thing for you. So that's someone that, my goodness, you like those credentials that he brings. You need playmakers. You need players to step in starting roles and in depth roles. So for someone like him who came out to UT with some high expectations, he could get quite an opportunity out here in Tempe.
Now, along with Frost, this is a guy that I'm really eager to see what he's able to do in terms of an instant impact at a position of dire need, and that's the offensive line. Ben Coleman, we talked about him early on because he signed. He's coming over from Cal, 6'4", 330-pounder. Love that size. He has arguably, I think, been Cal's best offensive lineman the last couple of years. He has 22 starts in the last 2 seasons, 16 at left guard and 6 at left tackle. All Pac-12 honorable mention this past season. Now, left guard, of course, with Ladarius Henderson now in Ann Arbor, and perhaps Isaiah Glass, who held down the left tackle spot for much of last year. If he continues his development, Coleman just seems like an absolutely ideal insertion into that starting left guard spot. If not, maybe challenging Glass a little bit at the left tackle position as well.
And I saw he'll be the 8th member of his family to
8th member
attend ASU, and he's not even from Arizona, which is wild. He's from California. So obviously he's got to have family out here, which makes you kind of wonder, did ASU even really go after him? I mean, in the early going, because he seems really enthusiastic about it. So, I mean, between, he being the 8th in his family and Dillingham being did he say his 6th, 8th generation, whatever generation,
like that.
Arizona, you got you cover
Deep
a lot of ground
ties.
here. Exactly. So, and again, you bring starting experience from this conference. Someone, I believe he had some measure of all conference accolades earlier in his career. He's got the starts. He's got the size. With ASU being in the position that it is, and you just really need to retool. I think this first year for Kenny Dillingham, you got to get guys out there to stabilize things as best as possible. Do you expect ASU to jump out and contend for a conference title in year one? That would be a major surprise. But to get things ticking in the right direction, to get some stability, get back to a winning record, bowl eligibility, that sort of thing. These are the kind of players that are going to help you get to that first step in the ladder.
We opened the show by talking about an acquisition from a pair of high school teammates. Well, I think in this case, you can also say the same. Magic kind of worked in the portal as well, because Ben Coleman's high school teammate was Travion Brown, who spent the last 4 years playing linebacker for the Washington State Cougars. Now, of course, this last year, the Wazoo defense is pretty damn good. That's why defensive coordinator Brian Ward is now in Tempe, along with A.J. Cooper, the new linebackers coach. And so Cooper, of course, knows Travion Brown really well. So obviously they liked what they saw there and brought him over. 6'3", 230 pounds, made 49 tackles, with 5 of which were for loss, and made 1.5 sacks last year. As a part-time starter, 119 tackles overall and 7 TFLs in those 4 seasons. A guy who has experience at the middle linebacker spot at the Mike backer. One of those is having experience in the on the Palouse. He has just 1 season of eligibility left.
Yeah, but that's you need linebackers. Kyle Soley, Merlin Robertson, out. That's something that you need to gather. So even if it's someone that's a one and done, so to speak, someone who's got starting experience, got Pac-12 experience, got experience as a contributor, experience with this coaching staff, so it checks a lot of boxes that are very valuable. Once again, when you're trying to plug short and long-term holes with this team and with this defense, because you certainly want to build for the future, but you want to put this team in a position to where you can be successful this first season. So this, to me, is a really solid pickup for ASU.
And as we mentioned earlier, kind of one of the surprise names of the day, defensive lineman Sam Benjamin from Idaho State. Now, it wasn't certainly a surprise to Charlie Ragle and Vince Amy. They know him well from the time at ISU. 6'5", 260-pounder, played at Ironwood Ridge down near Tucson, so another local prospect, not necessarily the Valley per se, but still another player from Arizona. As you mentioned, Joe, 8 games played last year as a freshman, making 14 tackles. So nice big frame there to help bolster the numbers in the defensive trenches.
Yeah, this one, strikes you as a depth move, guy that's got some game experience. He still could redshirt if necessary, just depending on how the depth on the D-line shakes out. Someone that this staff is familiar with. So, like I said, if he's making the leap from the FCS level to the Power 5 level here at ASU, the staff knows a lot about him. They recruited him. They coached him for a year. So, for them to put their stamp on him as someone who is capable of making this jump, that's a trustworthy opinion.
And the most, I would say most notable, at least highest profile from nationally, I think this is the only one that I've saw any kind of national folks really kind of discussing. Quarterback Drew Pine from Notre Dame. He is one who has signed, is official, so as soon as he attends class, will be all locked up. And as a Sun Devil quarterback, he opened last season as a backup to Taylor Buckner, but ultimately he was kind of inserted after Notre Dame, of course, got off to a slow start. Pine went 8-2 as a starter. Now this all opens up kind of the whole discussion and tangent and discourse on the value of quarterback wins as a stat and what kind of merit that has. But 8-2 as a starter and 4-1 in the 5 starts against top 25 competition on the year. Completed just a shade under 65% of his passes for 2,022 yards, 22 scores, 6 interceptions, added 108 yards rushing, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Now he's a listed 5'11", 198. So you all know the kind of math you need to do there with listed heights. But the guy is still a young quarterback who has 3 years of eligibility left.
Yeah, this was a really interesting pickup, and there are a lot of ways you can analyze it. He was essentially a third-year freshman this past year because he came in the 2020 class, got the freebie for the COVID season, played in a few games, but few enough to still redshirt in 21, and then of course he played quite a bit this past year. So, I mean, he had 4 games with at least 260 passing yards, some of which came against very good teams. At the end against USC, 23 out of 26 with 318 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick against the Trojans. He completed 17 of 21 passes for 269 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception against Navy. So both of those completing over 80% of his passes with some pretty decent yardage and touchdowns. Also had 289 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a win over North Carolina, which proved to be a very good team this year. Also, 22 out of 28 for 262 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick against what was a top 20 BYU team at the time they played early in the season. Now, also had some games like 9 out of 19 for 116 yards against Syracuse, and and that was a win. And even in a victory over Clemson, 9 out of 17 with 85 yards. I remember seeing the Stanford game where he really did not look good. 13 out of 26, so under 50% of his passes completed, 151 yards with 1 touchdown. Not a ton on the ground, 108 net rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. He only had 1 game of over, with 30 or more rushing yards. So, not necessarily that dual threat runner, even though he's not a particularly big quarterback. So there are a few ways that you can look at this. I mean, are you looking at this as a player who they would bring in and expect to start right away? Is this someone that, comes in and battles with Trenton Bourguet and others and maybe looks toward being a future option? I'm not really sure. So there are things to like about them. There are things to criticize about him. I think where ASU is right now, for being very realistic with the program, you may not necessarily appeal to, those upper echelon quarterback transfers that are going places that are going to make them contenders right away on a very high level. So this fit kind of makes sense, even if it's something that you call into question. And the bottom line for me about quarterbacks in this day and age of the transfer portal is it's really a year-by-year thing. The landscape of look at how different the quarterback position, the quarterback room for ASU has been over the last 12 months. And I don't think that that's an aberration. I think that's the new normal. So we're really looking at it this year, and then you'll reevaluate it next year. And if they need to go grab somebody else out of the portal next year, that's something that can happen. So for this season, I think it makes the quarterback room better altogether. We'll just see exactly what that means. It could be kind of an Emory Jones part 2, where it's someone that has starting experience and success elsewhere that just doesn't translate to ASU. So there are questions to be had of it, but I think there are things to like about it.
Yeah, I lean probably more towards the guy who has more questions about it. I was really kind of underwhelmed by the move. Now, of course, as you mentioned, one of the things, how attractive is this situation to the Grayson McCalls, the Spencer Sanders, the Hudson Cards of the world, some of the more notable portal quarterbacks that were available. Now, of course, there is, as you mentioned, if you look at what he was able to do in some situations, but also, I was talking to as soon as this was something that was out there, I started talking to some folks that were plugged into Notre Dame and did not exactly have the most flattering things to say. That being said, I would have said a lot of bad things about what Bo Nix was as an Auburn quarterback, and then we saw the job that Kenny Dillingham was able to do and how Nix blossomed from Bo Picks to a Heisman caliber quarterback.
Look at the things I and many others said about frickin' Jaden Daniels and what he did this year. Jaden Daniels was a terrible quarterback in 2021 for ASU. He was a running back that took snaps and threw arm punts sometimes. And he had a very good season, of course, with LSU. So different circumstances can do different things. Like I said, I just think the nature of the transfer portal and all things considered, this doesn't necessarily have to be completely looked at as a long-term investment like man, this is going to be ASU's starter for 2 to 3 years. Maybe it proves to be the case, but just year in, year out, because we've seen it, these first 2 true years of this transfer portal, you're not just getting the transfers like you had back in the day where it's like, okay, I'm not getting any playing time, I'm going to transfer. I mean, you're getting, obviously, you had the Heisman winner this past year, came out of the transfer portal. You're getting a double-digit amount of highly qualified, experienced starters this year, and it seems like this stuff is just going to grow as time goes on, and you have more success stories from the transfer portal. I think that's something, too, when you got a guy like Caleb Williams that comes out, and I'm not equating ASU to USC or even Oklahoma for that matter, but when you see these things happen and you have success, other players say, okay, well, I can do that too. Maybe I can go to a different school and really, up my game and, increase my brand and so on and so forth. So I feel like the quarterback availability is something that is going to be in pretty high regard. So if this is something that, happens not to work out this year, and they're obviously going to learn a lot about him during this upcoming season, whether that's him as a reserve, whether that's him as a starter, whether that's him in a part-time deal, we don't know what it's going to be. So, again, what I think a lot of folks, may fail to understand, and it's kind of thing that you brought up and I did too, is we don't know where ASU stood with some of these other more notable quarterback options from the transfer portal. I'd seen some social media reactions of, why didn't they get this guy or this guy? You don't even know if ASU could get the time of day from them. I don't know if they could. I don't know if they couldn't. This could be really the best option that they had in that market. We don't know. We'll never know. So it's something that, again, if you're adding someone who has starting experience and success, it's something that still needs to be evaluated, because I was very excited about the Emory Jones acquisition. Now, obviously the offensive game planning for him just wasn't something that was suitable for him. So I'm not crowning this as someone who's going to come and take over the starting position and put ASU into double-digit wins or things like that. But I think at a bare minimum, it increases the competition of the room, and it'll make others better, because this is someone who has started at a high level. So, you can't sleepwalk your way through anything and gain or retain a starting position. So, like I said, the jury's out, but I think it's something that in some capacity I feel like has the potential to create some sort of dividends. We'll just see what those mean.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more, for me right now, it's more of a competition move. We'll see. Of course, you have Trenton Bourguet coming back and Pine joining the room. Jacob Conover, the guy who threw for one of those state titles and threw for over 10,000 yards and 100 touchdowns at Chandler. So you got a couple homegrown guys there. Bennett Meredith is back. Dalen McElmore, we'll see what his status is, as well as the 2023 commit Israel Carter, perhaps pushing his decision off for a little bit. Now, I did tweet out a poll, just kind of get the temperature reading of the Sun Devil fan base. So I want to see where you would have voted on this, Joe. Just kind of ask, listed out the current depth chart. Now, full disclosure, this was tweeted before Collins made his decision to enter the portal. But just asking, how do you feel about the current slate of Sun Devil quarterbacks? The options are love it, it's solid, worried about it, and need to add another quarterback.
I mean, I think I'd go with the solid one, because, I like Trenton Bourguet and what he's capable of doing. And, if you're realistic about it, and you just figured from the point that Bourguet took over the starting job that Emory Jones wasn't going to come back. So if you can kind of swap him out for someone who has starting experience, and you get a young quarterback, that you're almost kind of swapping roles, really. I mean, you basically are trading, in a sense, Emory Jones, a guy with starting experience, for Pine, who has starting experience, Paul Tyson, who's a little younger and has some, higher accolades on his reputation, similar with Conover. So, I think that's a fairly solid circumstance if you have, Bourguet as your starter, which, again, I am fine with, and a backup with starting experience or someone that can push him, and then another one in the room that has some accomplishments and upside. So being realistic about it, because, I'm just not expecting a Brock Osweiler or a, Jake Plummer or Andrew Walter to walk through that door quite yet. I think solid. Again, not a thing that I'm concerned or afraid of, but not necessarily something that I'm saying is, a magnificent, infallible group of players.
All right, Joe, you did pick the People's Choice. Over 914 votes were logged. 56% felt the room is solid. 31% love it. 9% are worried about it. And 4% say that ASU needs to add another quarterback. Personally, I would kind of split my vote between it's solid and they need to add another arm. None of those guys, I think, really have the kind of the dual threat ability that I think really kind of is maximize the potential of the Kenny Dillingham offense. No, I don't think the current roster of quarterbacks is exactly perhaps set in stone. This is, I don't think, what ASU is going to war with next September. I think there's going to be some movement. Of course, ASU did make the move to land Emory Jones following spring practice last year. There's another transfer window. We'll see. But as of right now, I think it's in better shape than it was. I mean, of course, you saw what Trenton Bourguet was able to do. Now, we talked about his perhaps, doesn't wow everybody in terms of physical tools with his stature or cannon of an arm, but just, off the chart intangibles. And so he'll be learning a brand new offense as well, along with the other guys. Jacob Conover, of course, another local kid with insane high school production. He'll be getting his chance, but of course, Drew Pine. A lot to happen in the next few weeks and months. So we'll, of course, be talking about all that. One notable portal return in terms of all these portal additions. We talked about Anthony Cooper making the choice to come back last week after his dalliance in the portal. ASU's defensive line got a nice big boost when B.J. Green, he of the leader in sacks 2 years ago and the co-leader this year, decided to come back and commit himself to the Sun Devils, further fortifying that defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, that was big. That's what you need because he's someone that you really expect to step into an even greater role. And, as times turn, he's becoming the elder statesman and needs to take on a leadership role. And you'll need that in year one of this new staff. So that was a real big deal. And, there are a couple other players, again, still in the portal that, I mean, you follow some of these Twitter accounts that are closely monitoring the transfer portal, and there are some guys from ASU that are out there that you're not even seeing them reporting offers. That's not to say that nothing's moving, but just kind of a curious case. We saw a handful that we mentioned earlier that have already locked in new locations, some of which are good spots for them to be, but you're also seeing some that there's just real quiet. So you never know what decisions these guys are going to make as far as returning or not. You just hope some others can, at this point you'll take just about anybody back that's in the portal for ASU. So hopefully some others follow suit. That Green, he certainly didn't start, but others like Conyers, of course, though he didn't technically enter the portal, but hopefully others choose to return.
All right. So before we dive into a Sun Devil Festivus, put a bow on this by just some numbers. As of right now, and again, we are recording this on a Wednesday evening, December 21st, because these things move quickly. ASU has locked up 6 defensive linemen / edge defenders, with 2 coming out of the portal, 6 defensive backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 via portal, 4 offensive line, 1 via the portal, 2 quarterbacks, both from the portal, and a portal punter. And for me, both lines on both sides of the ball were very critical areas in dire need of upgrades, and I think ASU has done a really good job in terms of addressing those areas. There's still work to be done both sides. I'd like to see them add some more talented bodies there, but for me, those were the most 2 kind of alarm bells, red lights flashing type of situations, and I think based on what they were able to do in terms of getting quality, talent, and experience on both those sides of the trenches, that makes me feel a little bit better about this team's prospects for 2023.
From day one, Kenny Dillingham said he's going to attack the transfer portal, and my goodness, that was not just coach speak because it happened from the jump on day one of the transfer portal when you had that slew of Arizona natives returning home. So, again, when you take a realistic lens to things, you have to be very happy with what this staff has done with all of its recruiting, if you're just lumping everything together. Again, emphasis on realistic, because it's a tough expectation to think that ASU is getting, these multi-year starters, all-conference, all-American players at every position to bring in some superstar, all-star squad in year one under this coaching staff. It's a new staff. It's a program that obviously still has some clouds hanging over it, some unresolved complications. So there, are things that might create some questions for players that are considering Arizona State. So all things considered, again, I'm happy with it because I really look at this first season under Kenny Dillingham as just stabilizing. Getting back to, the 500 range, I think would be a solid achievement, and then you build from there. I think anyone who has this expectation, and not that I really see it, but if anyone thinks it's going to skyrocket in year one, I think that's unrealistic. That said, I think that the standards and expectations can be even better than they were this past year. So you fall somewhere in the middle around the 500 mark. Again, by stabilizing with what they've done, I think that's a good thing.
All right, Joe, it's time to put up the medal pole and prepare our donations for the Human Fund. It is time for a Sun Devil Festivus.
When you think of ways that you can review a year that was for Sun Devil athletics and life at Arizona State, you can disagree. And as your rain blows upon one another, you have to think there has to be a better way. So here we are with the Sun Devil Festivus. And, in the true honor of the Frank Costanza created holiday, we're going to talk about some feats of strength. We're also going to talk about some airing of grievances, and there is a little bit to discuss of both, as there's been quite a bit that's happened in the year that was of 2022 for Sun Devil athletics.
And speaking of, there also is a better way to buy a car in Arizona thanks to friends at Jones Auto Group.
Absolutely. You want to get a real good gift for this holiday season. You want to roll into the new year in style. New year, new you, new ride. Whatever reason you might have to get into that car of your dreams, get it at Jones Auto Group. If you're a Sun Devil, that's the place to go. Jones Auto Group has 4 dealership locations in the state of Arizona. They've been family owned and operated for more than 50 years. These folks are avid supporters of ASU and Sun Devil athletics. Jones Auto Group is ready to roll out the maroon carpet VIP treatment to fellow members of the Sun Devil family just like you. As we have seen in the past, they get closely involved, skin in the game when it comes to NIL participation in Sun Devil athletics. So that shows that these folks put their money where their mouths are when they say that they support Arizona State University. They're invested in the success of Arizona State athletics. They're dedicated to supporting the Sun Devil student athletes and the entire ASU community. At Jones Auto Group, the Sun Devil community is truly treated like family. If you're concerned about any sort of issues, I know I say this every single week, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart. If you've got credit issues or anything that is just really causing you not to move forward with pursuing the vehicle of your dreams, put those fears aside. Talk to the folks at Jones Auto Group. They will do everything they can to outline every possible option to create a winning game plan just for you. And like I keep telling you, if you want to find out about how you can save money on tax dollars that you spend on a new vehicle, that's a big deal. When you're buying a new ride, that stuff can add up. That's yet another unique advantage that Jones Auto Group can discuss with you. So if you're even considering a new vehicle, talk with these folks. So here's what you do. You text DEVILS, text that one word, DEVILS, to 67199, and you will get in touch with the owner. So we're not just talking about some switchboard automated responses, talking to some robot out in outer space or someone that's on a different continent or anything like that, or someone who's going to try to pressure you into some, high sales situation or really put that to you. Now we're talking about the owner. We're talking about my guy, Parker Jones. Not just the owner and GM, but a third-generation Arizona State alum and just like you, a die-hard Sun Devil fan. He will talk things through with you, outline every option that there possibly could be to get things set up for you. So to do that, once again, text DEVILS to 67199. That's DEVILS to 67199. Check them out online and browse their inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles at JonesAutoCenters.com. Jones Auto Group, Arizona's best since 1970.
Hey! Happy Festivus, everyone!
It is now time for a Sun Devil Festivus.
The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're going to hear about it.
That's right, Frank. Begins with the airing of grievances, where we are going to outline some of the things that we did not like in the year that was of Sun Devil Athletics in 2022. And then a little bit later on, we'll also discuss some of the things you, our beloved listeners, did not like. There was a common theme through a lot of your stuff as well, as you can probably guess. We'll start things off with kind of Joe and our list. One of my things was really annoyed all year. No fullback touchdowns from Case Hatch. What the hell, man?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, in a season where you want a little spark, you want a little change, and someone that, was a key part of the offense, even in a way that's not super measurable, you wanted to see Case Hatch get his, and that's unfortunate because, I mean, goodness, he earned the right and, has the ability to do so. So that was unfortunate. That's something that you wanted to see at least one for a Sun Devil career, and it sucks that he goes out without a single score to his credit.
Now, this one was kind of one that was kind of clouded and controversial. And I don't know how much merit there was to it, but it was perhaps like the investigation, itself maybe did not have the biggest effect, but the kind of ripple effects had perhaps rang out a little bit more. Of course, it was coming out of the story from The Athletic that there was that a lot of people, even though the story itself did not explicitly say this, but it basically was read as that a lot of folks from within the program, perhaps even coaches, giving out info with the aim to bring down Herm Edwards and end his reign in Tempe.
Yeah, real odd deal when it was going on, and just a real curious situation that, again, didn't really truly materialize in anything as far as like people actually caught in the act, and probably never will because the staff has moved on and the change has been made. But it's just something that was a bad look at a time where things were already looking bad. So that's a grievance to air, just to kind of have that insult to injury even be a discussion topic at a time where a lot of folks are cracking down on ASU.
And another grievance that folks have been airing, Jaden Daniels making the announcement that he's coming back, only he wasn't. Taken off to LSU, and perhaps the ripple effect there is that had ASU reportedly costing them a chance at having a kind of a homecoming of Spencer Rattler, who, kind of an up and down season at South Carolina, but also ended in a big way with a couple of top 10 wins. Yeah,
just a really unsettling way that transfer went down because, there was thought that Jaden Daniels might, turn pro, and he makes this announcement of his return to ASU, and then before long, he moves on to LSU. So it's just the way that it happened, just very, very frustrating and unsettling because it's like, okay, if you're going to come back and if the transfer is going to happen, you can do that, have that be your move. So it just, again, not a great look. And as you mentioned, the dominoes, the ripple effect, just a lot of folks seem to either be saying confidently or outright confirming that, had Daniels' presence was something that prevented Spencer Rattler from coming to ASU, and had he been gone, that he might have come this way. Now, who's to say how that would have worked out here? Would have been, just a similar outcome to like an Emory Jones? You never know. But as you mentioned, Rattler had a good stretch there at South Carolina, so that's something that, knowing what it would have been nice to have him on the roster. But again, that departure for Jaden Daniels, that's going to make him one of the more enigmatic Sun Devils in a long time, as far as someone that did some great things here and created some memories, but just went out in a way that really rubbed people the wrong way.
The coaching staff fallout in early parts of the year with, of course, Zach Hill and Antonio Pierce departing with their ties to the ongoing NCAA investigation and the misdeeds there, and just kind of, having to fill both coordinator spots kind of in a with your backs against the wall at a time of year where most of the coaching carousel has already ramped up, and we saw and discussed throughout the year the major issues on offense and defense. Of course, Sean Aguano taking over helped things a little bit on offense, but just both coordinators, having to pluck Glenn Thomas and at that time of year, and then Donnie Henderson, what we saw from the defense, just got off to a bad start early in the year and just got worse.
Yeah, I mean, the dominoes fell. Obviously, the coaching changes in the Herm Edwards staff date back to even the 2021 season when you had those trio of younger coaches who were placed on administrative leave, never came back. And then the dominoes really fell in the early part of this calendar year when you had Zach Hill and then Antonio Pierce both depart. And then, as you mentioned, filling those spots, just doing so with an offense that was pretty anemic for a while, didn't play to the strengths of the personnel, and a defense that was as bad as we've seen here overall in many, many years. So those two combined, usually it's like one or the other. You got maybe a good offense, bad defense, or vice versa, but both those came crashing down. So, the whole coaching fiasco was something that, had an impact in a negative way in several ways this season.
Well, we could also have one quick update to this list. The ASU lost, only lost by 37. The game just went final to the ASU's loss to San Francisco. I guess they didn't lose by 50, so there's that. All right, so of course ASU NIL got off to a bit of a rocky start in terms of that relationship. A lot of other schools were more proactive than ASU, and Ray Anderson, I sat down with him and heard him on this feed say that ASU was not going to engage in an arms race. And, that's not exactly the right attitude to take. Thankfully, ASU is doing much better recently, but the Sun Devils and the program, the athletic department in general, behind the eight ball a little bit. A lot of ground to make up in terms of that kind of lackadaisical, hesitant approach to NIL.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a double whammy to where, as you mentioned, behind the eight ball, not entering the NIL era as prepared as you'd like, and then that statement, and as it was repeated or reiterated, was just something that, again, rubbed people the wrong way, because it's one thing if you kind of start behind the eight ball but do your best to catch up, but to essentially give the impression that you're not even going to compete in that realm is, again, something that just really created frustration, because that certainly at that time was and remains, and it's an ongoing thing with just how NIL is impacting college football, but that was certainly at that time viewed as the way to get a program back on good footing. And if you make the implication that you're either not going to participate in it or you're just not even going to prioritize competing in that realm, gives the impression that you're not really focused on being highly competitive in the sports themselves. And whether that was the intended message or just the kind of the way that the message was received, kind of a moot point, was a frustrating thing. But obviously matters have changed, and it started from the first minutes of Kenny Dillingham's presence as a head coach at ASU with Knapp Lawrence, the generous legend that he is, dropping $1 million. So things are improving in that regard. But if we're looking back on the year that certainly was something that a lot of frustration there.
Yeah, and anybody who missed the podcast with Sun Angel Collective Executive Director Brittany Willett on this feed, just a couple episodes back, we go into great detail on the process and approach and strategies of the collective now that they're actually trying to get ASU to be competitive in that space. Another grievance. This is one that is kind of interesting. Is both kind of a producer of grievances and also a grievance in general. The kind of the fan base, just the apathy that had set in for a large part, just kind of the disgruntled nature. Now, granted, there's a lot of things to be upset about and a lot of grievances to air. Of course, and then some folks even going as far as saying they're not going to support any ASU sports until there were leadership changes. And I think, as we'll get to, there's a lot of folks that are just kind of feeling that job is half done. Me specifically, I think there's one subset. So many people, like ASU in any sport, will fall down early or get off to a rough start, and you see it on like the tweets just start flying. Oh, we lost. This game's over. Fire everybody. When a lot of times, and we saw, with basketball, not tonight, but in early parts of this season, the second half surges are commonplace, and they get a lot of wins. Football was always competitive, no matter how bad those first halves happen to be. Just like chill out, folks. Like let the game progress. Just stop having such strong knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah, on that, same general topic, definitely take issue with folks who have gone to extreme lengths to gripe about the administration and make some extreme statements and actions in terms of, their lack of support. Now, I can't and won't tell people what to do with their money. I understand that Sadly, the only thing that really resonates if a change needs to be made is to, withhold contributions and that sort of thing. But I mean, we've seen cases of folks that are, tweeting at recruits not to come to ASU, or telling, active players on the roster that it's in their best interest to transfer. Not that they don't think that they can hack it here, but these fans are saying, I want you to go somewhere else because you shouldn't be here. This is a sinking ship, et cetera, et cetera. That's severely extreme and just massively counterproductive. We're talking about cutting off your nose to spite your face to the nth degree with that. I mean, that is just ridiculous to take that approach. Like I said, I support people, expressing their, right to express their frustration and their opinions, and it's a frustrating time. That's something I'm not saying everyone should shine things up and, make it seem like, ASU is Georgia or Alabama and everything is amazing and can keep this status quo forever and life will be just dandy. Certainly not saying that, but there is a line, and it can be a difficult line to truly identify, of maintaining a sense of support that will allow the program to succeed. Because if everybody stopped caring, then, I mean, you're not going to get much here in terms of recruits and coaches, etc. But I also understand that there's a balance between that level of support, but also, voicing a stance, voicing an opinion that, again, will resonate and create change. So I think obviously the coaching hire pretty much universally appreciated at this point, and we'll see just how things unfold from there. But once again, I think it's a difficult line to draw, but there is a line between maintaining a sense of support to make sure that the program and the athletic department as a whole is just not on life support, but also, being able to be a catalyst for change.
Now, this one is pretty obvious. It was the end of the winning streak over Arizona. I think we can all appreciate the fact that the Sun Devil players went out there and they fought tooth and nail to the literal last minute, even after a rough year that I wouldn't say could be forgiven if they just kind of packed up, just kind of the way the season went and all the obstacles that were thrown in front of these young men. But they fought hard, but ultimately for the next year, the Territorial Cup is in Tucson. It's not good.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that if that happens any year, no matter the circumstances, every year we'll do this Festivus. That's going to end on the list if ASU happens to lose that. So regardless, the context, the circumstances, that's a very bad thing.
And finally, no resolution or end in sight for the NCAA investigation. The black cloud continues to loom.
Yeah, I mean, that is what it is. And you look at, Arizona basketball getting their, results after like 5 years. Now, granted, these are not necessarily apples to apples comparisons, but it's just something that shows you that these things can just drag on and on and on, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, it's a massive frustration just not to know what your fate is and not even knowing a timeline, because this could impact the program for however long it takes just for resolution to come, and then whatever is going to happen as a result of that resolution. So, like they say, the waiting's the hardest part. So for there not to be any sort of just indication of what's next, it's going to be frustrating until it is.
And so a few of you listeners decided to share some airing of grievances with us, and we'll do a quick rundown. Now, most, if not all of you, made mention that Ray Anderson's continued employment is a grievance. Duly noted. Mr. Sauceman does not like Adidas and would like Nike or Jordan brand. He also wants to see some black helmets. Don't hold your breath on that front. Friend Juan Grande, Tucson turnovers, EMU, Stanford, most of the football season, honestly. The defensive line and the offensive line injuries, the outbound transfers. Brian Gronewald, apparently the football investigation is not over until somebody can pin the NCAA. Pretty good. A little foreshadowing for the next part of this. Up the Hill Sports did not like the lack of Sparky on helmets. I mean, he makes his annual appearance. Also is not pleased with the baseball program, which is interesting because, as we'll talk about, a lot of folks thought that was a feat of strength. Daylight Films does not like change the football uniforms every week. I think It's about time you get with the times. Proud Devil alum, his grievance was losing to the U of A holes in football. It's a pretty solid list. Nothing too unexpected there.
And now, as Festivus rolls on, we come to the feats of strength.
We will end on a far more positive note. These are the feats of strength for Sun Devil Athletics in 2022.
So we'll go ahead and get it started. Obviously, this one hits home on a personal level, but I think objectively, you got to consider it a solid feat of strength. My old man, Pops, Tim Healy, getting his 25th year in as radio play-by-play voice of the Sun Devils. Cool accomplishment, huge accomplishment. That's a win.
Absolutely. So it's not Sun Devil Athletics without the dulcet tones of Mr. Tim Healy. This is the greatest dynasty in sports and academia, like in ever. Move over like Ming, the pharaohs. ASU is the 8-time champions of innovation.
Man, if they give them rings, like they're going to have to start putting them on their toes or something like that. Still to this day, and I may live my entire life not even knowing
Better that way.
how they measure innovation. But you know what I'm saying? Like, whatever it is, I'm not going to question it because ain't broke, don't fix it. And if ASU's the innovator masters, then just keep it rolling. Let's just keep this thing chugging along. Do what you do. Keep on innovating. Again, I don't know what in the hell that means or what they're doing that innovates, but they innovate better than, these nerds at MIT or whatever. I think those are the ones that are up there. So, hell yeah, brother. Keep on innovating.
All right. So, speaking of dynasties, now this one has a ways to go to catch up to the innovation, but no school can catch ASU when it comes to women's triathlon. 6 straight NCAA championships, and as a result, not surprisingly, head coach Cliff English was just awarded a contract extension. Let's get that thing to double digits.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, you're doing something right if you're winning over and over and over and over again. I mean, 6 times the championships at any level, in anything, at any competition. I don't care if you're playing beer pong or what. Obviously, women's triathlon is much more higher distinguished than that wonderful party game. But whatever it is that you're doing, if you're the champion at it 6 years running, you're doing something right. So congrats to them.
All right, so the men's swim and dive team coming off a historic year in which they finished 6th in the NCAAs. That's the best finish for the program since 1990. And most recently, this season, even better. They're the new #1 team in the nation, atop the polls. Bob Bowman doing some work. A little teaser ahead. There'll be a podcast with head coach Bob Bowman about what he's been able to do to lead this great resurgence and building of a true powerhouse. The dynamic super sophomore Leon Marchand. I don't think he's lost. I think he's 13 for 13 in his races so far this season. This could be a very historic year for the men in the pool.
Yeah, something real special going on there. And fun fact, Bob Bowman has a similarity that he shares with both Brad and myself, as he is a Pike, if you didn't know that.
Oh.
So there you go. So
Should've
you know
asked
what?
him about it.
That is the ultimate success right there. That's the measure of that. Guys like, Tim McGraw and others. So that's what creates success. So we need to keep that charge going.
Now this is something that I know is near and dear to Joe's heart. The wrestling team has finished 4th at the NCAAs this past season. Colton Schultz, national runner-up, and they are in line to even do some better things this season.
Yeah, back-to-back top 4 finishes at NCAAs is the first time that ASU's done that in decades. Of course, this is a wrestling program that, just about 15 years ago was on the chopping block, was actually cut from the athletic department for a very short period of time. So, and that's actually something that happened with the swim program as well. So you have these couple programs that, were facing extinction from ASU that are now having massive national success. So, I mean, it's something that is incredible with what they're doing, and they're a very high-ranked team this season. Certainly have their sights set on a similar type of finish this year. So we're in the era of ASU wrestling that is as good as it has been since that late 80s when ASU won a national championship. So things are alive and well, and they've got some youngsters that are going to keep this thing going for a while. As you mentioned, Colton Schultz, national runner-up in the heavyweight division last year. Only his loss in the championship round was, of course, to Gable Steveson, who an Olympic gold medalist and the defending NCAA champion. Colton was very competitive against a guy who's one of the most legendary collegiate wrestlers that there's ever been, so there's no shame in dropping that. So, once again, this wrestling program that not that long ago was kind of a middle tier program, even in the conference, has become a dominant team on a national level, and this year proved that once again.
Now, this one might not look good exactly tonight, but overall, it's been a great start for Bobby Hurley's basketball squad in 2022, 2023. Of course, they were 7th in the preseason Pac-12 media poll, but they entered the rankings for the first time in quite some time. Now, 37 points, lost to San Francisco notwithstanding. Now, of course, perhaps that one loss a few weeks ago kind of spurred a win streak. So perhaps the loss tonight will help them in their upcoming match against U of A on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, see, if we would have been recording this yesterday, we would have said this with a ton of confidence. If we were recording tomorrow, we may not even listed it, but we put our list together. Hey, we're going to stay true to what we had. Leading into this game against San Francisco here Wednesday evening. Yeah, very hot start in the national rankings. Great defensive teams. A lot of things that were very exciting and encouraging to watch. Not the case tonight against San Francisco, and we'll just see what the long-term outcome of it is. It would be, frustrating if things took a nosedive from here. But again, if you exclude that and look at the body of work leading up to it, very encouraging.
Yeah, and they were also playing without, I believe, Devin Cambridge, one of the key players of this early resurgence for the Sun Devils. Hopefully, he's able to get back. He believes he was out with a non-COVID illness. And again, it was a very difficult football season. No two ways about it. But there is a lot of respect, and I think we've mentioned it a few times on the show, that this is a team that could, so much was thrown at them for the last year and a half off the field. A lot of things, the coaching staff, the investigation, and the stresses, and just the struggles. But this is a football team that just never quit. I mean, they were, whether it's making the comeback against Wazoo, fighting off a Washington team, or even playing to the last, despite having a multitude of turnovers, fighting to the last second to keep the cup. The football team never quit, and I showed that was a great testament to what Sean Aguano was able to do as interim head coach, and just kind of exactly what you want to see in kind of the spirit of a Sun Devil.
Yeah, moral victories are tough to really brag about, but in searching for positives among this football season, they had some fight, and it paid off in games like the Washington game, despite getting a quarterback injury and having to put Trent Bourguet in his first real meaningful time and seeing what he could do, lighten it up. That was a fun bit of time. So again, there in seasons like this, when things fall off the rails and you've got the cloud of the investigation going on, it can really, really get bad. Now, granted, again, the overall outcome was really bad, and it was one of the worst outcomes statistically that ASU's really ever had as far as the season's concerned. But within that, if you're extracting things that you can say, that in itself was pretty good. Yeah, there was fight. They did, carry on within games to the bitter end. It doesn't always result in a win on the scoreboard, and that's not something that, you want to be moral victory but, you do have a sense of pride in the fact that they didn't collapse within themselves and just completely get blown out of every game.
It's always cool when somebody is able to kind of achieve a lifelong dream, and even better when it's a friend of yours. So Gus Farwell being able to perform at Gamage Auditorium, absolutely sensational show. I mean, he's so effing talented. He just really brought the house down. But also it was kind of cool because he was in the States for a while as a result, kind of getting ready for it, doing some work with the Pac-12 network. That allowed him time. I believe we had lunch with him at the Falcos, kind of introduced him to the greatness that is there. He was all I got to run into him in a few press boxes, at ASU games throughout the course, but just all leading up to that iconic performance the night before the UCLA game, where it was just a show for the ages.
Yeah, our guy Gus Farwell, and I was tickled that he asked me to record the introduction for him. That was a cool experience to be a part of as well. He rocked it. It was an awesome crowd, awesome night. He just he did an incredible job. Was proud of him as a friend, and to be able to catch up with a lot of his former teammates and the turnout. It was just a really special, really cool night. I mean, he did a lot of different kinds of music, so what we saw was just a really vastly entertaining evening. And hopefully it's something that maybe there could be more down the road. That would be awesome. You don't know what this sort of thing can lead into. So yeah, like you said, to see a buddy of ours be able to check off like a bucket list type of thing, that's always a good time.
Yeah, a guy who he told the story would always kind of like break in or sneak into Gamage when he was a student, just kind of sit on stage and peer out and just kind of dream about one day performing there. And for him to kind of achieve that was just really cool to be able to be there and see that. And, speaking of great buildings, Mullet Arena, it's now a thing, open for business, and is the new home of most notably Sun Devil hockey as well as other sports as well. But it's a new crown jewel in kind of the Sun Devil infrastructure.
Man, it's a cool spot. If y'all haven't gotten down there, check it out. I've been down there for when wrestling competed against Missouri, and that was a great scene. And I've been out to the Sun Devil hockey game. Going to be getting out to some more here around the New Year's Eve weekend. Really cool environment for hockey. I mean, that's obviously what built the place. Passionate fans there that are pretty much filling the place for a lot of games. Wrestling is awesome there. It's just it's a state-of-the-art facility for those sports. So that's something that it's just cool to be able to be out there. It's it's a much better scene than God bless Oceanside, but man, that place was it had its charm to a certain extent, but this is just a incalculable upgrade. And then even by comparison to Desert Financial for for wrestling, this is just a more suitable environment for that. So when you have those upgrades going on for those sports, it's a really cool thing. So the hockey can be a tough ticket in some cases, but encourage you to get out for that. Support our guy Greg Powers, and of course our other guy Zeke Jones. Wrestling, that's going to be probably a much easier ticket in most cases. So if you haven't been out to Mullet Arena, get on out there because it's a great place and just a great spot to support Sun Devil athletics.
And perhaps the crown jewel, and we've been talking about the fruit starting to bear. The hiring of Kenny Dillingham. And just when it was interesting when he was announced as the head coach and introduced, I believe, on that Sunday, the 27th, 28th, right after the U of A. That U of A game felt like it was months ago, just in terms of just how much this staff has done to revitalize and re-energize this fan base. We talked about in the grievances, and just that apathy had really started to set in. But getting Kenny Dillingham and his staff together, just in the passion and energy they bring to their mission to activate the Valley, it is paying off. And whether it ultimately is successful in terms of wins and losses, the energy and outlook right now is such a needed breath of fresh air. And
you can kind of backdate it because obviously credit is due in a lot of ways to Sean Aguano for keeping passion alive within the program. Again, the wins and losses did not add up in a way that anyone wants them to be around here, but the passion that Aguano showed for the period of time that he was interim head coach was something special, and obviously that helped lead to him being retained on staff. But yeah, going back to that Territorial Cup game, I mean, that was on a Friday, and then about 24 hours later, the rumors really started to substantiate about Kenny Dillingham being the one. Now, obviously, it was kind of like the worst kept secret or just basically a foregone conclusion or an expectation. But when it's ASU, you always wonder, are they going to screw it up? Are they going to do the right thing? So once those rumors really started to fly, like this is going to happen on that Saturday, and of course the hire was announced late Sunday morning. Again, that Territorial Cup game felt like it was really in the rear view because you started to get momentum for the future of the program. And that was something, of course, with how Kenny Dillingham presented himself in the press conference with the passion and the energy that he did that you cannot fake. And it certainly is not faked by him. And then adding the staff that he had and that passion and how they echo things. You hear interviews with Charlie Regal. You hear Vince Amy talking about what he's doing here. You see Jason Mons come in. And you see that supplemented with other passionate folks like Carrington and Samples that can recruit like crazy and just bring a lot of energy. So this coaching staff for right now is exactly what ASU needs because of the passion and the energy that they have, and that's basically contagious to the fan base. Like, this is a very good combination to help re-energize this fan community. So that's why, I'd say it's the number one feat of strength, so to speak, because it's just the most positive thing overall, for the flag bearing program at the university in this football program, just to turn the page into a positive direction. It's a rebuild that is not going to be automatic, but the steps that have been taken, whether it's the energy that the coaches have showed, putting the staff together as it has, and the early returns within recruiting, again, if you take a realistic lens to it, I think you got to give it high marks across the board.
All right, so as we close out here, just a couple of feats of strength from our listeners. Michelle Aaron is giving props to Colton Schultz and the men's golf team. That's kind of the mission. They, I believe, finished second in the country to Texas. And making a run at a potential national championship there. Chris Sobel likes the staff hires that we just talked about and the hockey and hoops trajectories. Take Back Liberty had a nice spin. The feat of strength was ASU's loss to Eastern Michigan because it led to Herm's dismissal. So I guess the domino effect there, playing the long game. Juan Grande likes the UW win. Baseball's recruiting. That's something we could probably dive into here in an upcoming episode. Lobo Jangles, the greatest feat of strength was attending every ASU home game, tip of the cap, and many Cardinal home games, which led to a tremendous amount of airing of grievances. Up the Hill Sports gave special shout-outs to X Valade, Jalen Conyers, Elijah Badger, Trenton Bourget, and Kyle Soley. Daylight Films gave a hat tip to the triathlon team. And Proud Devil alum likes the, trajectory of baseball and hoops, and Kenny Dillingham. So I guess Festivus is over. The pin has been made, and that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. Actually, this might be our first guestless show for a while, but we are over 2 hours. I mean, this is a lot to discuss. So make sure you stay with us on the social media side of things. Of course, as we mentioned, there's going to be a lot of development in terms of player additions coming up here in the coming weeks and months as we go. You can follow the show on Instagram at Speak of the Devils, on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/SOTD Podcast, and follow me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at bdenny29.
And you can follow me on all the things at Joe Healy 42, and certainly wish you all the best for the holidays, and also thank our wonderful sponsors. Of course, DeFalco's Deli, Cactus Sports, Devil's Digest, Jones Auto Group, and of course Spaghetti Shack, which you know by now is not just Sun Devil owned, but owned and operated by a former Sparky the Sun Devil. They're located in Tempe near the intersection of Rural and Guadalupe at 6340 South Rural Road, Suite 114. The Spaghetti Shack is opened Monday through Thursday from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m., Fridays and Saturdays from 11 to 10:30, and Sundays from 11 to 8. Now, of course, with the holidays coming up, those hours may be subject to temporary change. They, of course, have their Ghost Kitchen location at Bar Vigneto, which is at 7215 South Power Road in Queen Creek. So if you're out in the Queen Creek area and you got a hankering for some Spaghetti Shack, here's what you do. You go to thespaghettishack.com on the internet and click the process to start an order, and it'll give you the option whether to pick that up at the Tempe location or the Queen Creek Ghost Kitchen location. And then you'll place the order there, pick it up there at Bar Vigneto, but you'll be eating Spaghetti Shack food. Sounds like a good deal to me. And meanwhile, you can support them on social media. You can find them on Facebook at The Spaghetti Shack. Follow them at Spaghetti_Shack on Twitter and on Instagram at The Spaghetti Shack, so you can know about all the good things they've got going on here as we enter into the new year. So to view their menu, hours, and to order online, visit their website at thespaghettishack.com. The Spaghetti Shack, takeout for the pasta-loving people. And as always, a huge thank you to Sun Devil Family Charities, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization created primarily for the purpose of raising funds to provide financial assistance to Arizona State University alumni, students, staff, and immediate family members adversely affected by medical issues. Monetary donations are always appreciated, and they support those in need due to unexpected medical conditions. Sun Devil Family Charities also has volunteer and sponsorship opportunities that you can learn about on their website. And so to learn about those opportunities, to learn more about this charity and ways that you can help support them, or if this is the type of charity that you might benefit from, check them out online at sundevilfamily.org.
And once you're done supporting our great sponsors, make sure to drop us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Joe and I will be back next week as we hand out our season awards for 2022.